Hello, today I'm going to introduce you to someone. It's actually someone that I'm pretty sure 99% of you would know. It may be a name that is very commonly often in your head, depending on if you have kids. And this is a name that I do not want you to let it go because this is going to be an acronym for a framework that you are going to utilize in your content. And that name is Elsa. Let it go, let it go. So do not let it go for the purposes of your content that is going to create stories that sell. So Elsa breaks down into an acronym that goes a little something like this: Epiphany Lesson Story Application. And I came up with this framework in a time where I was trying to figure out what comes first, the chicken or the egg? What comes first, the story or the lesson? Because they really can't go without each other. They have to go hand in hand. If you just try to teach the story, you're like step one, step two, step three, you kind of sound like the Charlie Brown teacher, like wah, wah, wah. It's just like all substance, no story, all facts, which is just fluff. Stories sell, facts tell. That might be one to write down a little sticky note and remind yourself of. Stories sell, facts tell. And so when we are creating content, we want to make sure that even if it is just like a punchy one-liner, one of your mic drop pieces of content, like there is an emotion behind that. And if we want to have kind of longer form content, we want to make sure that there's an Elsa in it. And Elsa, like I think about Elsa, I don't let it go. I think about Elsa anytime I create any piece of content, even if it's a speaking engagement or a Facebook ad or anything. Like I have to use this and start with ELSA, and I reverse engineer everything to create any kind of piece of content. So let me break this down, what this means. So the E is for epiphany. Before you create any piece of content, we want to know, what's the epiphany we want? What do we want them to feel? Do we want them to overcome some kind of a false belief or objection in their mind? Do we want them to feel that nostalgia and motivation? Do we want them to trust us? What is the outcome that we want to get from that? And we want to know that because if you are just winging it, I mean, think about like the best movies that have inspired you and moved you. Spielberg, Scorsese, any of those amazing directors, they didn't just like have their intro and then wing it the rest of the time. They knew the plot lines and the twists that were going to help people to enter an emotion. And people don't take action until they feel something. So we kind of want to know, what are we going to help them to feel? And when I say epiphany too, it's our stories have to be better than our audience's stories. And what I mean by that is the stories up here. What are the objections, the things that they're telling themselves of why they can't do this? Okay, so if it's like, I want to create a piece of content that is going to, my outcome is, my epiphany I'm going to give them is that they also believe that the more they play, the more they get paid. And so I need to share with them content that's going to make them feel that and make them question their own beliefs. Okay, and the L in lesson may be the L in Elsa, it may be for the lesson that is just like 3 points. Hey, step one, step two, step three. However, if we just stop it like that, it's boring. So we have to wrap the lesson into a story. People, when they're putting their kids to bed, they tell their kids bedtime stories, not bedtime facts. And so even though it's in order of epiphany, lesson, story, application, when you're writing the copy, you actually want to have the lesson wrapped into the story. However, it's put in that order because it needs to be to make this acronym work and for you to remember Elsa. But when you're writing it, you might have the lesson in mind, but you have to wrap the lesson into a story. And I'm going to give you an example in a moment too. So you tell that story, and that's what moves people. That's what makes you relatable. That's what that creates the feely, you know? They go from the thinky to the feely. And then A, application is, well, now how are they going to take the next step and apply this into their lives? So whether that's a call to action, click the link below, get this thing, come to my event, give me a call, go to my website, or hey, here's something to consider. I challenge you to do this. Like, go hug your neighbor. You know, it doesn't have to be a call to action necessarily that's going to drive towards generating a lead. It could be a, here's what to do next. Okay, so that's how Elsa breaks down. The reason why I created Elsa, or the story of how I created Elsa, was because I was, scrolling through Instagram one day, as one does, and I came across this big influencer, like multi-millionaire influencer, who was doing an Instagram story or something, and her message was like, you can do anything you set your mind to. Get after it, champ. And I was just like, wow, she's a bajillionaire and that's what she says? Like, I mean, there are worse things people could say and make bajillions of dollars. But I was like, man, there's like, I just had higher expectations that she was going to say something that would move me. And so that's where I came up with this of like, this is the facts. And even though they're well-meaning, and of course it's still accurate, you can't do anything you set your mind to, it needed to be wrapped into a story. And so this is where we're going to start to create at some point a story inventory where we can understand what's the corresponding lesson and what is the corresponding story. And sometimes I'll think of a story and I'll be like, I wonder what the lesson is that I can teach with that. Or sometimes I'll think of a lesson and then be like, now I need to find the story. We're going to create vaults for this in the future, one day at a time. So I spoke at an event once, and I started sharing with the audience this story of my grandfather. My grandfather I lived with from his age 82 to 86. I think I was about 22 to 26, something like that. And those were like very tender years. I don't know if you've ever lived or spent a lot of close intimate time with a grandparent, but like just being around elderly people is just so tender, so sweet. Oh my gosh, the stories I would hear, and oh, just precious. Like, I hope you watch this and you just, if you have any grandparents, go hug them, go give them a phone call, write them a letter. Anyway, I moved in with my grandfather shortly after my grandmother passed away, and they were together for 58 years. I mean, how do you live another day after losing someone that has been your entire life? I can't even imagine. I started staying over, and then I eventually just never left because I just wanted to support him in this time after losing the love of his life. And after I moved in, I started to ask him stories, because something that he would do after he lost my Baba, we're Ukrainian, so it was Baba and Guido, is he would sit on the couch next to her picture and he would talk to her every day. Like, just how sweet. He would talk to this picture of her. And he would tell me stories of how they raised their children, you know, the youngest of them being my mom, on a farm. But that wasn't actually how he started his marriage with her. He used to be a photographer, and that was his dream. He loved photography. He loved being able to take photos at hockey games. I mean, we're Canadians, so to be able to go to a hockey game, and he said he didn't even need a ticket. He just had his camera and they assumed he was the media, and he got straight to the front and got to take pictures at the hockey games. Like, he was just glowing sharing this story. And his photography studio was called Home Plate Studios. But one day he gets a call from his parents, who had a farm, and things were not going well, and they were about to lose the farm. My grandfather, my Guido, being one of the oldest of 10 children, felt this obligation of, I need to help my parents. And so he sold everything. He sold his beloved camera and moved in with his parents, with his new wife, my grandmother, and they saved the farm. But back then, they didn't have the opportunities that we have now, and it wasn't like he could just go start back up again, because they were kind of just barely getting by on the farm, and he ended up just inheriting the farm. And he told me, and I never knew this about him until, you know, in his last years, that he was devastated. And he told these stories of him being on the tractors in the fields, crying, because that was not his dream. That's not what he wanted to do. And he felt like this wasn't the life that I promised for the love of my life, Helen. But he would speak so highly of her, like she was such a good girl. She never complained. It was a tough life, but it was a pleasure. That was a quote that he said a lot. It was a tough life, and but it was a pleasure. And I share that with you because it really inspired me and impacted me that we live in such a day and age that, I mean, look how many side hustles we can start before breakfast. I believe 6 impossible things before breakfast. Where's that from? Great quote. Makes me just realize like how much previous generations would think is impossible that we get to create today. And there are opportunities at our fingertips, and you can do anything you set your mind to. Do you see what I did there? I showed you the before picture of the preachy kindergarten teacher influencer saying, you can do anything you set your mind to. And then I share with you my story, which took me a few minutes to share with you. Thanks for sticking around and watching this. Of here was an Elsa. The epiphany that I wanted you to feel, to have, was this belief of like, oh my gosh, we get to do impossible things right now. We are so lucky. The fact that you're watching this, that you have an internet connection, that you live in an English-speaking country, you can do anything. Like, I never want to hear any excuse. The more you play, the more you get paid. So that was the epiphany. The lesson, I could, go into that and share like, hey, here's how to start a business, and here's how to create content, here's how to drive traffic, and here's how to have an offer. The story was Guido, 82 years old. It was a tough life, but it was a pleasure. Crying on the tractors in the fields. Application could be click the link below, and I can help you make your impossible dreams come true. Okay? How cool is that? Here is your game for today. So here is the Elsa framework. And I broke this down into what this is if you need a little reminder. And guess what? We have a Chad prompt. I saw some of you guys were calling it Chad, which is great. ChatGPT or Gina. So what if we take one of our mic drop quotes and we turn it into the Elsa framework? And it's up to you if you want to film this as a video, and you can use the Elsa content framework the Elsa framework as an outline to follow a storyline that way. And like, even just thinking of your content like this, of like, what is the epiphany I want them to overcome? Or what's the objection? What's the epiphany? What I want them to feel? How do I give them a lesson, wrap it up into a story? And what's the next step? Like, this will change how you see content to make it easy and make it so fun. So if you need a prompt, we're going to put it into ChatGPT. So let's put this here. And I'm going to put, my favorite mic drop quote. The more I play, the more I get paid. And I'm going to give it a little more details about this. I want to help people get away from feeling like content is a grind, and that when you have the right strategies, it's actually so fun and makes bajillions of dollars, which I can ethically say because the FTC can't come after me for saying a word that doesn't exist. Bajillions. All right, so look at this. It's giving me the prompt already. Most people think content creation is a necessary grind, something you have to push through to get results. But what if that belief is the reason you're not seeing the success you want? What if the secret isn't hustling harder, but having more fun? The more I play, the more I get paid. Content doesn't have to be serious to be successful. The more serious you take it, the less likely you are to stand out. The moment you start seeing content creation as a playground, where having fun is part of the strategy, that is where the real magic happens. I'm going to share with you exactly how, and here's where I see it in the prompt. It showed me lesson first, because that's the order of Elsa. I'm going to start with the story first, because that's how it's going to show them why you should believe me. I've heard Russell Brunson talk about this, that the story is necessary because it shares how you learned it and how you earned it. If you just throw out facts, they're like, yeah, whatever. But if they learn that, like, you went from rock bottom to the top, and that's why this matters. That's why you have to hear this. You hear the rags to riches stories, or we watch movies where, we saw them hit rock bottom before they won the race or landed the dream job or got the girl, and it's more impactful because we were with them at rock bottom. Okay, so first we're going to go into the story. I used to think that success depended on how many hours I put in or how polished my videos were. But when I started creating just for fun, my audience grew and the revenue followed. What a concept. One video, I was like goofing around with a trending challenge. It ended up being my most popular video that month, and I generated thousands of dollars in new business. And that's when I realized by playing, I was tapping into something magnetic. So here's what you're gonna do. Number one, experiment with new formats. Try out new video types. Try out challenges. Try content that excites you. Number two, lean into your passions. Like, what do you love that you can just get obsessed about, you genuinely love and think it's fun, instead of what has to sell? And then set a play goal. Instead of strict metrics, set a goal to have fun with your content, and then observe how your audience responds. Okay, and then the next thing that you need to do is I want you to create a piece of content that is just for fun. No rules, no expectations, just something you genuinely enjoy, because the more you play, the more you get paid. Boom! That's the video, that's the post, there you go. You can copy and paste it into here. I gave you an example of, this is one that I did previously. I kind of like the new one that I did now. And then you can like break out, just take the instructions out of it and break it into the script. Or you can, whether you want to do it face to camera as a script, maybe you follow along with it as like a, I don't want to say ramble as in like it's not, sometimes I say ramble, but I don't mean like careless by ramble. I mean, you saw what I just did. I took the outline of it and I said some things, but I also went on tangents to add my own personality and story into it. So there you go. There is the Elsa framework. I hope you love it. I hope you love her. Look how cute she is. And share the link in the Elsa badge. Can't wait to see how you do.